Okay, today is lecture on the architecture of SAP and ABAP, the role of ABAP. We have three layers in SAP. The presentation layer, where the screens and the users interact. Okay, the user interface is interacting with users, while the middle layer, where the ABAP code, the configuration code resides, and at the application layer level, we have ABAP that works with various work processes. And a part of ABAP is the dispatcher, which distributes requests coming from users and allocates resources for processing of the requests with the work processes. So what are the types of work processes that we have is dialog request to update data in database, background jobs, pull request, logical lock. Now, dialog request, basically, it's the running of transaction code and producing a result. For example, when you're posting a GL document, you can simulate it. That is a dialog it will produce. Request to update data in database, and that when GL is posted, it gets posted to the database. Background jobs, there are many simultaneous jobs that are carried out within SAP, like calculation of payroll, posting of accrual or depreciation, or values in material ledger. These are all happening in the background, and these are necessary month-end, year-end transactions, reconciliation. These are carried out in the background because if these are allocated, the screens, the front end plus the processing, it will eat up the resources of the system. So these jobs are pushed in the background for processing, and that the system then posts the results in the database, and a log is created of these background jobs. Spool request for printing. This is for printing reports for various transactions of every module. Now, this is again a work process. Similarly, we have routing messages between servers. So these routing messages can be within the server or server to server. Okay, then we have gateways, where again third-party software is communicating with the SAP system, and that is being routed through work process of gateways. So ABAP Dispatcher is working at the middle level and has various kinds of work process managing funnel. And on the other level, it has protocols like the messaging server, the gateway, the communication manager for the internet, which communicates with the internet gateways. So messaging server handles communication between distributed dispatchers. So dispatchers can be numerous as well, spread across the application servers. The gateway enables communication between SAP and external systems. The internet communication manager enables communication with SAP system using web protocols like HTTP. User context. Now, what is user context? If you remember, we had this shared memory. Now, and we have this space and buffer for context. Now, what is context? It actually loads user defined or user preferred default data like date format, number format, right to left or left to right. Okay. Language. Now, these are basically current settings user actually prefers for himself. And these are basically in this, these settings are set in the authorization part. We'll see that. And these contexts also stores the program the user is currently executing. If you look at the ABAP dispatcher, the role is quite diverse for an ABAP dispatcher. It has to communicate with the user interface. It has to communicate through LAN and WAN networks. It has to acknowledge requests coming from user interface from the users and allocate requests to work processes, which can be multiple. And it has to also control work process simultaneously in parallel. And it's like issuing tickets to passengers, and those work processes have in itself multiple layers. We have an ABAP interpreter, we have a screen processor. Within a work process, there is a powerhouse that is being handled. Okay. And that is basically being handled by a task handler, which communicates with the database, which is also working with the buffers, the shared memories, the user context, the programs, the tables. So work process is also it is there at this level that you're working with work processes as an ABAP expert. So database layer, it has a central database. Every SAP system has. The software component is responsible for database layer. And it also stores administration data, customizing the source code, and of course, user data as well. So the three layers that we have in SAP are presentation, application, and database. Okay. The presentation layer is where you have the screens for finance, for inventory, for HCM. But the code, the source code, the configuration of the entire system is here at the application. So this is of prime importance. This is why ABAP consultants have their own importance. The ABAP code, the ABAP protocols work here, execute here. This is the place where ABAP resides. And the ABAP dispatcher basically is active in acknowledging requests from various user side through gateways, through messaging servers, through internet protocols, and the dispatcher is also working in parallel with the database through the dispatcher, through the work process, types of work processes like the spool, dialog request, background jobs, messaging gateways, and so on. The buffer, again, I've already told you, it loads data from the database and stores here like user context, user settings, customization of the modules, and sends it and produces it to the presentation layer. So buffer actually helps to speed up processing data that is often read, like the customizing data, the currencies, the company code are basically kept at the buffer level. If you look at it from the programmer's point of view, this is how it communicates with the database level. It has a database interface, okay, the application layer. The interpreter, now this is a work process which is communicating with the database layer. It has a database interface, it has a local buffer within, and it has an interpreter. Now, interpreter will communicate with the interface or directly communicate with database, okay, using native SQL or database data is directly accessed, okay? But through the interface, it uses Open SQL, and database interface uses native SQL. So the interpreter has the privilege to use both the protocols, okay? So this is a classic client-server relationship architecture. The task of ABAP is to process data. These receive inputs from presentation layer, and they actually process at the database layer. Okay. I hope this was clear to you.